closing session of this 6th annual conference of INSS. We've had 2 days of professional, harsh, interesting, fascinating debates concerning a variety of topics. And we are now reaching the last straight. Somebody said during one of the sessions that during the last straight you have to run quicker with the concerted efforts. This is what we're going to do now during the next hour and a half. We have 3 important lectures, I believe. The first by Professor Stanley Fischer, Chancellor of the Bank of Israel. It's now my honor to call upon Mr. Jeffrey Silverman.
Are you here, please? Okay, thank you. Mr. Jeffrey Silverman, who is one of the distinguished members of our Board of Trustees, and we are very proud to have him here with us. Please.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Stanley Fischer. You can read all about him in Wikipedia. I'm going to discard the prepared introduction that was handed to me. And I have but one question for Dr. Fischer that I think will be of very strong interest to the parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles in the audience here. Dr. Fischer, if I may ask, what was it that impelled you as a young man growing up in Zambia to want to pursue a career in economics and make the difference in the world as we know it? Thank you.
Mar Frank Lowy, יו"ר הוועדה המנהל של המכון ואלוף
Brigadier General Reserve, I believe, Amos Yadlin, head of the Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, I can answer this question. Regardless of the fact that we resided in Central Africa, schools were excellent. And our examinations were sent by the Cambridge University, and they would be sent back to be marked, etc., etc., etc. And this was British education. We had the O and A levels, and for the A levels I decided to become a scientist, so I sat for tests in chemistry, physics and mathematics, and along the way I met a friend of my parents' friends, who began explaining to me what he studied at the London School of Economics. And I said, well, this is quite fascinating. And he began teaching me. He had the classic textbook by Samuelson, and we began using it. He taught me.
And I was hooked.
And I was booked, and thus I came to where I am today. There were certain cornerstones or milestones along the way. It took us about 40 years to reach Israel. It's a well-known figure, by the way. It's just a coincidence, however. What I'd like to do today is to speak about the economy, the Israeli economy, and then speak briefly about the security budget and the implications of the economic situation on the security budget. I'm not going to discuss problems relating to long-term issues. we have very important problems, and we begin taking care of them, and I'm relating to the problem of a substantial proportion of the population which is not participating on the labor market or economy, and to an extent within society. The new government surely will try to tackle this problem. I'm not going to speak about the fact that our demographic structure is the way it is. Should current trends continue, it's going to be rather problematic. I assume that it's not going to happen, even though this threat is still persisting. I'd like to focus on short term, the situation of our economy. I'm going to speak about the monetary policy, about the impact of natural gas that started being part of the economy during this quarter. I relate to issues concerning debt arrangements and the budget. Allow me to say briefly something about the economic situation. It's very good, not excellent. It was excellent in previous years, and what has changed is the budgetary situation, and I'll speak about it. I hope that Yair Lapid would follow me, yet I understand that he'll be coming somewhat later. So I'll now survey the main aspects of the macroeconomic situation, and except for one, I'd like to tell you that the situation is very good except for one aspect. And let me begin. We cannot speak about the Israeli economy without relating to the world, because after all, we are exporting 40% of the GDP to our markets, and their condition is impacting substantially our economy. So, here you can see the first slide. What is the prediction, the growth prediction of the world economy issued by the IMF? And we're speaking about predictions that we received just a week ago from Washington. What you see, you always know that you're not in a very sound situation when every prediction for 2014 is better than the current situation. So you know that you are facing a problem. In the United States, they expect a growth of less than 2% this year, 3% next year. Europe negative this year, 1% in 2014. Even the emerging markets that are rapidly growing are expecting an increased growth. And what is very important with regard to world trade, for this year the prediction is about 3.6%, contrary to the average of 7%. That is to say, half of the average valid for the years preceding the major crisis in 2008-9. So the expected growth concerning world trade is going to be rather slow, meaning that relative to export, there are not great expectations, or there are no good news concerning the export markets. Israeli growth. Well, this year we expect a 3.8% growth rate. When I'm telling it to my friends in the community of chancellors, and we are a community, we all know each other, they say, "What are you complaining about?" we'd be delighted to think that our growth rate this year, this current year, would be 3.8%. And that's correct concerning Western countries. However, our 3.8% include 1% based on gas import, or not necessarily import, but the fact that Israeli gas started flowing into the economy on April 2nd this year. That is to say, about 3 weeks ago. And this is replacing the energy source that we were compelled to import in consequence of the offer from Egypt, which caused us suffering in 2011 and 12, whereby we were compelled to use, instead of gas, diesel, costlier than natural gas, obviously, and now we are replacing it by our gas. So not only do we have a more effective energy source, we also have less import, which is going to impact favorably on the economy. So at the Bank of Israel, we're speaking about a growth rate of 2.8% without the gas, with the exception of gas of the economy, because there's little employment in the gas production. So relative to employment, we shall have a relatively low growth. Sorry, relative to our history of the last decade, not relative to the world. Now, the working or the labor market situation is excellent. Unemployment rates are the lowest over the last 30 years. And this is quite an achievement, I would say. There's no much talk about it, but if you have noticed, you don't see many complaints about unemployment level in the media, which is always an indicator. When there's no way to complain, you know that the situation in Israel is quite good. Actually, excellent. Beyond it, a miracle occurred, and we don't really understand it fully, namely an increased participation of the population on the labor market. When I came just 8 years ago, we said that we had a problem in Israel because the participation rate on the labor market was rather low. We saw a leap over the last few years, which is not fully understood, regarding the percentage of the working population. Between 2007 and 2012, it increased from 70%, and I'm speaking about age groups 25 to 64. From 70, it was up to 74%. It doesn't sound substantial, but it's immense. Part of it derives from the decreased unemployment, and part is deriving from the increase in number of people who decided to look for a job and who found a job. We don't really know where it stems from, hoping that it's really stemming from the two sectors or communities who had been declared as non-working. We're speaking currently about these two communities, namely the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs. We don't have data that would enable us to give the final answer, but no doubt this is one of the most important developments in the Israeli economy for many years.
אז שמה אין עבר.
In that case, we don't have any
חדשות
past record. It's all good news.
לגבי,
As to the balance of payments, in 02, between 2002 and 2012,
פחות או יותר,
we more or less had a certain balance with the current situation of the balance of payment. Export equaled import. 2013, we are expecting once again an excess in consequence of the difference or the gap between export of fuels, because we will no longer need to import fuel, this energy source. And this will improve the situation of expressed by more than 1% GDP in the current balance, and we'll be back in the black. Usually, when I'm speaking to students, they don't find it odd that we are in excess in our balance that continues as of 03. However, those who are my coevals, and a large proportion of people I see here in this hall or in the tent, it is a miracle. It's not an imaginary miracle. It happened, it occurred, it happened over the last decade. And this is the impact or the success of high-tech that we can see here. Presently, more than 50% of Israel's export is high-tech produce. And if we speak about Hyman, you reach almost 70%. Whoever thinks about oranges is not familiar with the Israeli economy, an economy producing and exporting very advanced and sophisticated products. And this is a major success of the last decade. I'd like now to speak about the monetary policy, and here there are certain buts. The red line is depicting actual inflation. Currently, inflation over the last 12 months has been 1.3%. The target is 2%. The difference between 2 and 1.3 is not so important. So we believe that more or less we are halfway to the target, very close to it. Interest of the State of Israel, of the Bank of Israel, is 1.75%, very low, not low enough compared to the international arena. All major economies worldwide, United States, England, Europe, and Japan, surely, have a lower interest rate compared to us, and this is causing people to desire to invest and acquire Israel Bank debentures of the Israeli government, even for 4 weeks, because you can attain an almost 2% interest in Israel, much more than what you can gain on the major markets. And this is causing one problem, namely, we have capital import and we have an excess in the current account. We have import of money because of our export pressing on the rate of exchange. Therefore, we can see pressure for revaluation. And the second problem, 1.75 for those who want to purchase a flat or a house is low relative to other rates. So in housing, prices are increasing, whereby we should increase interest, and that's a problem. One important market, we say it's good to increase the rate. In another market, it's good or important to reduce the interest rate. So in the monetary policy, one has to try to navigate between these two impacts. Moreover, we have to find various ways to impact capital movements on the one hand and real estate prices on the other. I cannot go into detail. At any rate, please notice that occasionally we do intervene in the foreign currency market, purchase dollars, extricate them from the market, releasing their pressure on the rate of exchange because they don't buy shekels from the private sector but from us. Regarding the housing market, we are constantly trying to increase or to enhance funding and impact the cost of funding of mortgages in a variety of modes of which you're familiar, as to the land value ratio, capital requirements for mortgages. And this is an ongoing game, and I believe that this is the right way to proceed. So these are the problems. If you want to know what we think about it, I'll give you two data, and you will understand our way of thinking. The added value of export for the Israeli economy is about 30%, roughly, and the added value of construction real estate is about 8%. So what's more important for the economy is export. If indeed we have to make a decision where to focus with our endeavors, I believe, or we believe, that export is more important. If indeed we have to choose, export is surely more important than the Ministry of Housing, and beyond it we have many more tools to implement in order to impact the housing market. All was nice and well, with a few problems. Now I'm reaching the harsh part of my talk, and the harsh part is here, and that's the government's deficit. We had a problem in 2003 concerning the budget. The deficit exceeded 5% at that time, 5% of the GDP, and the State of Israel had difficulties in mobilizing funds, money, via sale of the benches on the markets with reasonable interest rates. At that time, the government, with the finance minister who was Netanyahu, endorsed by his prime minister, Ariel Sharon, devised a program that in Europe would be defined in the austerity plan. They called it a growth plan, and they were truly right. And this decreased the deficit, the budget deficit, within 4 years to nil, which is a gigantic achievement. They were quite determined. They introduced required changes, and they succeeded. And the reason, one of the most important reasons for our success in tackling the world crisis during 2007, 8 and 9 was the fact that we started with a zero deficit, and this is a very good situation to start with. And we thought and planned that as of 2009 we would do what we had done between 2003 until then. And to 2003-04 we had a declining deficit. We saw something similar between 2009 and 2010, but there was no similar achievement between 2010-2011. And the reason was basically the problem concerning world economy. the export rate, the increase in export declined, and therefore the growth rate of the economy declined. There was less free money, there were less taxes, and this influenced the deficit. In 2012, growth continued at a rate of about 3%. The government spent more than planned, and this had never really happened in history. And tax receipts were very low, so we reached a deficit of 4.2. And one may say, well, it's not too bad. In the States it's 70%, in England 8%. So what's the big deal with 4%? The difference is very simple. The problem with 4% is that we are in full employment. We are not an economy with much unemployment, whereby we can assume that in the coming years there would be quicker growth than the average. This is what they assume in the United States and in Europe, that the economy will start reacting to steps generating an accelerated growth, tackling the problem of the budget. We don't have that luxury. When we are looking ahead of us, therefore we have to tackle the budgetary deficit. And in a meeting a couple of days ago, the finance minister made a declaration, also the prime minister announced that their target for the budget, the budgetary deficit for 2013, would be 3%. I believe that this is a rather courageous decision, a very important decision, and if we manage to stick to this target, it will contribute to the recovery of economic growth. I want to say, why am I so much bothered? Have a look at what happened between 2007 and 2009. The government didn't spend more money. What happened was simply a collapse of the tax receipts as a system, because taxes are quite sensitive to the economic growth. So when growth is rapid, it's okay. When you are down to zero growth, deficit is leaping upwards. And should we enter recession, which I don't expect in the short term, should we embark upon recession in the coming years, we see a leap from 4% to yet another 4%, namely 8% deficit, which is going to be much more than any deficit of the 21st century. And would be very difficult to finance it, and we should never reach a situation like that. Therefore, I'm very happy that the finance minister and the government, the finance minister actually and the prime minister, came to the conclusion that 3% is a good target and attainable. Our debt was very high in 2007 relative to other countries. Currently it's quite low. In the United States, the United States actually superseded us, reaching 8%, England even more, and this is what's happening worldwide. And in the meantime, we are reducing the debt, and in 2013 the expectation is for some slight increase, but all in all we are in a decreasing trend. So relatively speaking, relative to debt GDP, we are in a rather good condition. Well, there's another part. I heard that I've got only half an hour, and now I see the Minister of Justice who just came, and I don't want to rob her of her time. I simply wish to speak about gas and how we take care of it, and something about the security budget or defense budget, and then I'll hand over the gavel to Tzipi Livni. We will have our own gas, which will be part of the economy, generating money, reaching the government by from gas production. And this is causing what we call the Dutch disease. What is the Dutch disease or Dutch disorder? It is a phenomenon that happened in Holland in 2000, in the 70s of the previous century, when they discovered much gas in the North Sea. Gas entered the economy. The guilder became stronger. And why did it become stronger? Because when money was injected into the economy, it was pressing on the rate of exchange. And what happened? They had a strong revaluation, and this actually killed off Dutch industry. That's the disease. Whoever discovers richness or richesse in a certain place, bringing it to its economy, is actually causing revaluation usually, and this is causing a problem for the local industry. How shall we tackle it? Because it's going to impact us. We are taking care of it via a fund. This is a fund that will receive part of the taxes that should reach the government, extricate it from the government. How? We'll start a fund, and that's a vital aspect, to invest, namely invest the money overseas, so it won't be part of the economy. And this will prevent part of the pressure on the rate of exchange. This is the theory, that's the fund. The previous government passed the law for the establishment of that fund a year ago, but it never reached the Knesset on time in order to go through the first reading, and therefore we had to propose it or submit it once again this year, and the government just passed it last Sunday. No, not last Sunday, 10 days ago actually. And I may even say that the Minister of Justice was doing a very important favor to those in favor of the fund, because she immediately introduced the Ministerial Committee for Legislation. Second stage after the government is passing a law. She did it on the same day and just addressed the Knesset. And it's very important for us to do it rapidly, as quickly as possible. As to the defense budget, security budget, I've got an abundance of slides. I want you only to see two. You see the public defense consumption as of the establishment of the state to date, about 1% of the GDP. And you can see what the October 73 war did to the state budget and the defense budget. It was more than 30% after the war, and it never declined below 20% until 10 years after the war. And if one may question what's the source of the problems of the economy in the 80s or late 70s, that was the source of the problems. You can't manage a budget when you spend 20% of the GDP on security defense without extraordinary steps. And usually governments under such circumstances are managing a policy that in final analysis leads to inflation, as happened in Israel. And now we reached a defense budget of about 6.5% of the GDP. It's the lowest budget in this slide as of 1954, almost equal to what we had in 1954. And this is very low in an international comparison, contributing to the economic growth. The United States had a peace dividend during the years of Clinton's office. We had something similar during the 90s and continues at a slower pace currently. So this is now decreasing as a percentage of the GDP, but not in real terms. And here, defense expenditure in permanent prices that are constantly increasing. As you can see in 02, the Intifada, the defense costs in real terms were rather high. They declined, and now they are back in 2012 to a level exceeding 52.5. And that's the largest proportion in the state budget. Every Israeli who has served in the IDF can tell you that there's waste and ineffectiveness in the army within the framework of the security forces. I do accept what they say. However, there's no army without redundancy and inefficiency. The question is, what can be done about it? This year, because of the need to decrease the budget to 3%, this year there's special pressure, strong pressure on the security defense budget. I don't want to go into all the arguments that can be heard on both sides. One approach reads okay, we don't have short-term threats, Syria is not going to do, Egypt is unable, etc., etc. Another approach reads observing a longer term, speaking about what's awaiting us from more distant enemies. Therefore, I don't want to go into it, even though I want to say that if we're speaking about some historic understanding or an understanding survey, our security budget is quite low. And we can speak about the fact that people the non-volunteer army, those who have been drafted, do not receive salary that they would receive if they were part of the economy. So if we include all the costs, it's 8%. It's not indifferent, absolutely. No way it is indifferent or negligible. But there are good reasons, economically speaking, to look for savings in the framework of the security budget. What will happen concerning the security budget and the economy's ability to regain stability the way we enjoyed between 2003 until 2012 or 11. So also the security aspect is extremely important. As an economist, I don't have any opinion concerning what is required, except for the fact that I know that the most important element for the state is to maintain national security, but without any exaggeration. And I'd like to thank you very much, and I wish all of us major success, and I'd like to thank the Institute for the annual invitation extended to me to report to you about the situation of the economy. Thank you very much.